What's up, everyone? I am back. Week 2 is in the books, and I am coming at you with my Week 3 NFL picks, along with my locks for the week. Now, again, I'm recording this video prior to the Thursday night game between the Rams and 49ers, but if for some reason I don't upload it in time, my apologies. I'll put it up as soon as I can following that game. But in the meantime, let's get right into it. I'll give you guys my picks along with the spreads. Now, kicking off the week, we have got the Rams at the 49ers in San Francisco. And look, it's a divisional game. You saw what happened last week with the 49ers and Seahawks. Nobody expected that. Much closer game than anticipated. And I think the Seahawks are a better team than the Rams. So for that reason, I think this will be a close game as well. In terms of the offenses playing here, neither of these offenses is in the top half of teams in football this year. Now, I think the Rams have been lucky to play some poor teams defensively these first 2 weeks, and that's why they've maybe looked a little bit better than they are. The 49ers, again, defensively, they're still really young. They're still figuring it out. So I give the edge to the Rams on the offensive side. And defensively, I also give the Rams an edge. They're stingier, and they've got more experience there. So, all in all, I expect the Rams on the road to win outright. In terms of the spread, the 49ers are at plus 2.5 at home. I do think it'll be a close scoring game, but I think the Rams can separate themselves a little bit towards the end. It'll be at least a 3-point game in my eyes. So, I take the Rams in terms of the spread as well. Moving on, we have got our first London game of the year, and that is the Ravens versus the Jaguars. Supposed to be a home game of sorts for the Jaguars, but I think the venue will neutralize that. I do, however, think it's going to take a little bit of time for both these teams to get their footing, just because of the setting of the game. It's tough to play in that kind of new venue, but at the same time, while I expect a little bit of an offensive struggle in the beginning, I think that it'll kind of get blown open the game itself, scoring wise towards the end. Now, the Ravens, they are 2-0, and that is behind a dominating defensive effort their first 2 weeks. And look, offensively, they still haven't looked that impressive to me. I think a lot of it has been capitalizing of those turnovers from their opponents. And again, this week they're playing Blake Bortles, who is turnover prone, and I think that'll play right into their game plan. And for that reason, I expect when it gets down to crunch time, the Ravens to capitalize on those turnovers and to kind of blow out the Jaguars late. So for that reason, I like the Ravens to win. In terms of the spread, Jags are plus 4.5. Now, I think it'll be close going into the third or fourth quarter, but at the end, like I mentioned, Ravens will distance themselves. So for that reason, I'll take the Ravens in terms of the spread as well. Next, we have got the Falcons at the Lions, and I think this will actually be one of the more interesting games of the week. The Falcons have looked good. All those talks of a Super Bowl hangover kind of looking silly now. Of course, there was that little scare in Chicago week 1, but I think they've gotten the rust off. Looked really good versus the Packers. And on the flip side, Lions, maybe a little surprisingly 2-0, but they've also looked good, put up a lot of points versus the Cardinals, and then handled that Giants team pretty decisively, even with that Giants stellar defense. Now, I just think it comes down to offensive firepower in this game for me, and I really like what the Falcons have. You saw it on full display versus the Packers. When the Falcons are clicking, they're almost unstoppable on offense. They've got so many weapons in their receivers, and then don't even get me started with Tavon Coleman and Devonta Freeman. And I think they're also underrated defensively. I think Dan Quinn has done a nice job. That defensive is coming up to speed in terms of what he expects. And I think it'll be a close game. Don't get me wrong, but in the end, I think the Falcons come out winning this game. I think they just have a little bit more offensive firepower than the Lions. I think they're less turnover prone than Stafford is. And I think that defense is a little bit better than that of the Lions. Now, in terms of the spread, the Lions are at plus 2.5 at home. So, with these very low spreads, I usually take the over. And for that reason, I will go with the Falcons. I think it'll get decided by more than 3 points. And for that reason, going with the Falcons. Moving right along, we have got the Broncos at the Bills. Broncos sitting at 2-0, and surprisingly, Trevor Siemian has looked pretty good. Looking at last week, had a very nice game, but it helps when you have a really good defense like they do. They create those turnovers and put the offense in good situations to score. So it's a nice little combination there they have in Denver. Um, when it's all said and done, I think that Denver wins this game. I think the Bills do have some nice things going on defensively, but the Broncos also faced a good Chargers defense week one, and they were able to win that game. So for that reason, I think the Broncos will also win this game. I think they'll put up a little bit more points than people expect. And even though it's on the road, I'll take the Broncos. I think I envision something like a 20 to 10 game, 20 to 15 game. And in terms of the spread, the Bills are at plus 3.5 at home. And like I said, I think it'll at least be a 5 point victory margin. I just don't think the Bills have that many weapons offensively. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and take the Broncos. Next, we have got the Steelers at the Bears, and talk about two teams that are on the opposite end of the spectrum. Steelers at 2-0, while the Bears sitting at 0-2, and it's not looking any better for them. That offense for the Bears is horrid. It's so bad that it's trickled down to the defense. They're injury prone, they're turnover prone, and nobody can catch the ball on that offense. Mike Glennon is not the answer. On the flip side, the Steelers are loaded offensively. They've looked good defensively, and this matchup plays up into the hands of their defense very nicely. Now, historically, the Bears, in terms of the spread, they've done a nice job of covering that when they're over 7 points, which is the case here at home at plus 7.5. And the Steelers don't have the best history of covering, but look, taking into consideration what I've seen from the Bears and Steelers this year, I just cannot see any scenario where the Bears keep this game close. I think everything points to the Steelers blowing them out. I know it's a road game, but the Bears just do not have enough to keep up with the Steelers. Even if they try and keep it close, I think turnovers will be their downfall. You saw it in Tampa Bay last week. And again, I like the Steelers to win outright. The Bears 7.5 at home with the spread. I think it'll be a larger margin of victory for the Steelers. So I'll go ahead and pick the Steelers there as well. Continuing on, we've got the Browns at the Colts. And look, both these teams are 0-2. The game is in Indy, but without Andrew Luck, the Colts are just a team that cannot compete, to put it nicely. And this will probably be one of the toughest games to watch all week, if not all year. Um, the Browns are on the come up a little bit. Kaiser has looked good at certain points. So in terms of the quarterback, I give the edge to Kaiser a little bit. He's more familiar with that system. Um, but all in all, I think this will be a low-scoring game. Neither team is really gonna has the capability to come out and explode offensively. The defenses aren't anything special. I do expect it to be close. I think the Browns have more of an edge, primarily because of the quarterback position and the fact that he is more familiar with the system. And on top of that, he's younger, he's more mobile. That should help out. And I would say, if the Browns don't get the running game or part of their offense going here versus the Colts, they never will. So to me, this is their best chance to win out of these first 3 weeks. And I'm going to go ahead, pick the road team, go ahead with the Browns. I think it'll be a close, ugly game. The Colts at home are at plus half a point. I feel pretty comfortable taking the Browns in that scenario when it comes to the spread. Moving on, we have got the Dolphins at the Jets, and talk about another team that's going to be tough to watch all season. We've got the Jets again, and every week I've said they're going to be one of the worst teams in all of football. They're going to be involved in a lot of blowouts, and you saw last week what happened versus the Raiders, and maybe it won't be to such a large extent versus the Dolphins, especially because the Dolphins are with Cutler. And I'm not trying to hate on Cutler, but with him, he's always had that knack where against easy teams, against uh, opponents where he should win, he sometimes struggles. And on paper, this is a game where the Dolphins should win. They looked really good last week. Impressive win versus the Chargers. They had their running game going. Cutler looked like he was comfortable. So I would say on paper, I give the edge to the Dolphins. With that being said, I could see the Jets trying to pressure Cutler and leading to some mistakes and keeping this game closer than it should be. Um, and they're at home, so I think they'll have that crowd support. In terms of the spread, they're at plus 6.5. I've got the Dolphins outright winning, but to me, I think it'll be a closer game than people expect. I think Cutler will see a lot of more pressure, so I'll actually go with the Jets to get uh, at least that plus 6.5 margin in the game. Next, we've got the Bucks at the Vikings in Minnesota, and talk about two possibilities here when it comes to the Vikings. You know, does Bradford play? Does he not? What are going to be the outcomes if he does and if he doesn't? Now, to be honest with you, I still like the Bucks regardless of Bradford plays or not, and the reason for that is because obviously if he doesn't play, there's not going to be that same offensive power, firepower for the Vikings, and it's going to be an adjustment. You kind of saw it last week. They could never really get going. And then on top of that, even if Bradford does play, he will not be 100%. So I think the Bucks can take advantage of that. They've got a pretty good defense, underrated defensive unit. You saw what they did to the Bears, albeit it was the Bears, but they've got some young, talented guys on that defensive side of the ball. Um, this will be a tough matchup because the Vikings do have a good defense, so I could see it being low scoring, but at the end, I like the Bucks to win, maybe on a late field goal or something of that nature, right around that 20 to 17 mark. And for that reason, I like the Bucks outright, and also Vikings at home are at minus 2.5. I'll go ahead since I like the Bucks outright. I'm going to take them in terms of the spread as well. Moving on again, we've got the Texans at the Patriots in New England, and both these teams 1-1. But look, the Patriots have so much more offensive firepower, and we saw last week the Texans versus the Bengals. The Texans needed until the fourth quarter to actually separate themselves from a Bengals offense that was completely horrid, and the fact of the matter is the Texans are not going to be able to keep up offensively with the Patriots. I don't care how good their defense is, and it is good, but they have underperformed this season. And if anyone can continue to take advantage of that, it is Tom Brady and the Patriots. Um, they've got too many guys. I think Gronk will play. Hogan is there. Cooks is there. All their respective running backs, and they'll be ready. Look, in terms of the spread, the Patriots are at minus 13.5, and that's well warranted. You saw what they did to the Saints last week after getting humbled in week one. I mean, Brady pretty much put up the majority of his stats in the first half and didn't really have to do anything afterwards. I wouldn't be surprised if this is something similar. Um, I'm going to go ahead, take the Patriots, even with the spread. I think they can get a win with over that 13.5 mark. To me, the Texans just cannot keep up with that scoring and their offense. Even when they do make progressions, I think the Patriots defense will be able to create some turnovers and limit that scoring. Now we're back to another divisional matchup, and that is the Saints at 0-2 versus the Panthers in Carolina at 2-0. And actually, if I had to pick a upset of the week, this would be my game to target because of several things. First of all, the Panthers have not been tested against a real offensive threat. Uh, week one, the 49ers, week two, the Bills. Both those teams do not match up offensively with what the Saints can do. Also, these two teams know each other very well, and I expect Breeze to have that familiarity against the Panthers. I know it's not in New Orleans, and that's a knock for the Saints. I know their defense struggles, but the Panthers' offense isn't anything special. They lost Greg Olsen. Cam still has some of that rust. They're trying to make him into a throwing quarterback, and he is a runner first. So as long as they keep trying to make that correction, I don't think that offense in Carolina can live up to what it truly is. Now, expect Kelvin Benjamin to get a lot of targets, and those guys. Expect McCaffrey if he doesn't break out in this game, I don't think he will all season. So expect a lot of those guys to get usage. Um, but when it's all said and done, Carolina at home at -6.5, that's too high for me. Usually in these divisional games, uh, the teams split in the NFC South. I know the Panthers are at home, but if anything, at least for the spread, I know I like the Saints there. Um, and also, that's secondary in Carolina, a little bit overrated. I think a lot of those problems are masked with the front seven. Very good front seven, but that secondary can be taken advantage of. Look for Breeze to get a lot of long completions, and for that reason, I like the Saints. If they go up somewhere in the 20-25 range in terms of points, I don't think the Panthers can honestly keep up with that. Continuing the trend of divisional matchups, we have got the Giants, who are a surprising 0-2 at this moment, going up versus the Eagles at home in Philly, who are at 1-1. And man, talk about a team in Philly that has looked good. Had a late loss last week to the Chiefs. It was a very good game. And the Eagles have looked legit through 2 weeks, whereas the Giants have looked like imposters. That offensive line cannot block for Eli. They have no running game to speak of, and Odell is still clearly not 100%. Now, I expect Odell to get better and better every week, but the other guys around Eli just have to step up. Brendan Marshall hasn't done anything. Um, you know, the running game, like I mentioned, hasn't done anything. And that trickles down to the defense because they can't sustain drives. The defense, as good as it is, they get tired. And like I said, this game is at home for the Eagles. Um, it is a divisional game, so I do expect it to be tough, and a close game. But the Eagles have already showed that they can play good football with good teams. And offensively, Carson Wentz has looked good. Defensively, they've been able to be in games, and I don't see why all of a sudden the Giants would turn around the issues they've had the first 2 weeks on the road in a hostile environment. Usually, these games, again, similar to the NFC South, these games usually split one at home and then one away. This time, Eagles are at home. So, for that reason, I like the Eagles to come out in this game victorious. As far as the spread goes, they're at -5.5. Um, I'll go ahead. I will pick also the Eagles in terms of the spread. I think right now the Giants just have too many issues on that offensive line, and until I see some improvements there, I feel comfortable taking the Eagles. From here, we have got the Seahawks at the Titans, and both these teams 1-1, but they've gotten here in two different ways because the Titans have looked somewhat, respectable in their 1-1 record. They've put together good games, whereas the Seahawks, they've been tough to watch. Offensively, they just look hobbled. They cannot get going. Russell Wilson, he can't connect, not even with Doug Baldwin. Jimmy Graham having injury issues. The running game, maybe with Chris Carson now, they'll finally be able to figure it out. I'm not sure, but the Titans in Tennessee, they're actually the favorites in terms of the spread. They're -2.5. Now, to me, I think that defense travels well for Seattle. I think they can make any team play up to their standards, which is at the moment a low scoring kind of game. And I think that this is what it'll be. To me, there will be no in between. I think this will either be a low scoring game or it'll be a blowout for the Titans. But now, as I said, I like the Seahawks. I like their experience. Um, this might be a little bit of a stretch and probably one of the picks that I feel least comfortable with this week, but I'll go ahead, take the Seahawks to win on the road, which means, obviously have them against the spread as well, and look for the team to kind of finally have that little offensive showing, hopefully, and put together some sustained drives and show that, they are a Seahawks team that is still dangerous and can put up some points as well. Next, we have got the Bengals at the Packers, and talk about a mismatch because the Bengals uh, have looked like they don't even belong in this league the way that they have played offensively. Uh, had their offensive coordinator fired. I don't know how many issues that'll solve, to be honest with you, but Andy Dalton has looked extremely nervous and just cannot complete simple passes. The running game hasn't really got going. You've got AJ Green. There should be no excuses. You should at least be somewhat average. Force feed that guy the ball. I don't care what happens. You should be throwing him the ball at least 10 times a game. He will come up with at least five of those catches. You saw it last week on the one ball where Andy threw it for about 50, 60 yards. AJ came up with that ball. And they've got a game in the Packers where the Packers defensively, they're not that great. So if there's a game where the Bengals can somewhat come to life offensively, I think this can be it. There will have to be a lot of passing on their end because the Packers are stacked offensively, and I think they jump out to a lead, and the Bengals are going to have to keep up by passing the ball. So we will see what Andy Dalton is made out of in this game because there will be opportunities aplenty. And for me, this game is in Green Bay. The Packers stacked offensively. Jordy's going to come back. It was just a little issue with the hamstring last week. Uh, I think they're going to be angry with that result in Atlanta. I like them to win. They're at -9.5, and I still see the Bengals right now as a problem team on offense. I don't think they can keep up with the Packers, and for that reason, I'm also going to take the Packers at -9.5 at home to cover that spread. Continuing, we've got yet another divisional matchup, and this time it is the 2-0 Chiefs versus the 0-2 Chargers in LA. And look, um, the issue here is both these teams could actually be 2-0 because the Chargers have lost late, heartbreaking fashion with missed field goals versus the Broncos and versus the Dolphins. Now, they are playing at home, and the Chiefs are a good football team. They've got a good defense. Alex Smith has been playing well. Kareem Hunt has been playing out of his mind. They've got Tyreek Hill. They've got Kelsey. So they've got the offensive firepower, but so do the Chargers. Um, in terms of the spread, the Chargers are at +3.5. Um, and just by looking at their previous games, they've lost all those games by around 3 points. So when it's all said and done, in terms of the spread, I like the Chargers. If they lose, I think it'll probably be in that same kind of fashion. It is a divisional game, so I do think it'll be close. These opponents know each other well. But make no mistake about it, I still like the Chiefs to win outright um, because the Chargers are just finding every single way to lose right now at this point, and the Chiefs are finding every single possible way to win. And until I see, that turnaround, uh, I'm going to keep going with the team that knows how to win, and that is the Chiefs. Until the Chargers can figure out at this point those kicking issues, we'll see if they trickle down into this week. But until I kind of see that, I'm going to go with the Chiefs to win outright, but I like the Chargers in terms of that spread situation. Moving on to Sunday night, we've got the Raiders at the Redskins in Washington. And look, in terms of the spread, I'll start out with this because I think this is the most telling stat here. The Redskins are at +3.5, and to me, I don't think there's any way they can cover that. I think the Raiders are going to go in there. They have a good offense, and I think they're going to be able to win, and they're going to be able to win by more than just 3.5 points. Cousins, he started out slow, and if you've tracked his progress the last 2 years, he starts out the season slow and then picks it up. I think this is going to be a tough matchup in order to keep up offensively with the Raiders. So, in terms of fantasy wise, I could see there being points for the Redskins because that Raiders defense still not 100% sold on them. So, some late garbage time points, especially if they find themselves down early. They're going to be throwing the ball a lot. But to me, the Raiders just have too much on offense, whereas the Redskins, I think they'll come into it later on in the season, but right now they're still figuring things out. Jordan Reed dealing with some issues. So I look for the Raiders to win outright and also cover in terms of spread. And finally, we are to our Monday night game, which is the Cowboys at the Arizona Cardinals. And look, both these teams are 1-1, but they've gotten here two different ways because the Cowboys last week they got spanked by the Broncos, whereas the Cardinals barely beat the Colts. It took overtime. Now, I know the Cowboys' loss was a little bit more emphatic, but to me, it was against a good Denver defense and at a tough place to play in Denver. I think they're going to come back and they're going to be pissed off. They're going to put up a lot of points in this game. You know, they've got the edge offensively, no question about it. They've got the receivers. Dez, Witten is playing great. Zeke is going to come back and eat after getting dogged about his effort all week. And then on the other side of things, I think that Dallas defense is going to be able to do enough against an Arizona offense without David Johnson. Still trying to figure out that offensive situation in terms of the running backs and with the receivers. You know, Larry Fitzgerald is the main guy. I know a lot of people are going to say J.J. Nelson after last week's performance, but I think they're so inconsistent offensively that it's going to be a different Arizona receiver every single week. Um, and for that reason, and because, you know, they haven't quite looked like themselves defensively either, I like the Cowboys. Um, Cardinals only at plus 3.5 at home. I think the Cowboys will be able to cover that, no problem. Look for them to win and to make up amends for their loss versus the Broncos. So with that, obviously concluding the pick 'em outright portion of the video. And as always, I'll give you guys my locks of the week. And I actually have several this week. Feel pretty good about the Broncos versus the Bills, even though it's in Buffalo. Bills just don't have enough offensively. Then also Steelers at Bears. Bears, too many injuries, too many drops, too much Mike Glennon. Steelers are going to win this game, no problem. Uh, Also, I like the Packers at home versus the Bengals. Again, Bengals have looked offensively challenged. Packers are going to be pissed off that they lost. And at home, I like them to handle their business. And then finally, Cowboys at the Cardinals. I like the Cowboys on the road. Same reason as with the Packers. They're going to come back pissed off and they're going to give it to a team in the Arizona Cardinals right now that is not in the same league as the Cowboys. And with that, you know, let me know, do you guys agree with my projections, with my picks? Feel free to comment. And as always, you know, like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in future videos.